Okay, good morning. Sorry I couldn't make it in person, but thank God for Zoom. All right, yesterday we started a Sichah, and the Rebbe asked, it wasn't the Rebbe's question, it was really Sichos' question, that the pasuk in our parsha says, Yosef Yulad Shnei Yavonim B'terem Tovei Shnasad Av. Yosef had his children before the years of famine, and Rashi quotes the Gemara, why does it stress B'terem Tovei Shnasad Av? Is because Mikan She'asar Adam L'Shamish Mitasi B'Shnei Ha'Oven. From here we learn that it's usher to have marital relations in the years of famine. So Sichos asks, L'cher Yecheved was born Ben Achoimis when it was a time that was a famine. Yitzchak as well. Vayar Yitzchak Mitzafik. Avimelech saw Yitzchak Mitzafik. And Rashi says, Shiro Mishamish Mitasi, and that was a time of Rov Ba'aretz. So they gave three answers. One answer is that it's not an Isser, it's just a Midas Chassidus. Yitzchak and Levi were not being Mekayim Midas Chassidus, or before Matan Torah, there was no Isser. Or if somebody does not have children, there's no, and was not Mekayim period Vidivya, so like Yitzchak and Levi, so there's no Fakert, there's no Isser, or let's say the Mikveh night. And three, the Isser is not when Yidden the Isser is only when Yidden are Shtuyim B'tzar. Since Yitzchak and Levi, since they had Tvua, so they were not Shtuyim B'tzar. But Yosef, on the other hand, he did not know that his family did not have Tvua, and therefore he felt bad for them, so he was Shtuyim B'tzar. Now, the question is that I've asked, why didn't Rashi say anything? Rashi doesn't allude to this, Rashi doesn't answer, doesn't ask anything. And Ben Chumash the Mikro for sure will have this question. And then the Rebbe asked also, what do you mean Mikan from here? What about Parshas Neach? When Neach came into the table, Vasal Ateva, Atu, Vanecha, Vishtach, Nashe Vanecha, also says that it also says that was a Shnei Oven. Rashi doesn't say that he learns it out from here. So the Rebbe is saying this. In Dalet, he said that Mikan is basically telling us that it's very different between Neach's time and the time of Yosef. When in times of Neach, Ha'olam Shadu B'tzar means that the Welt B'chlal, there was no people there. There was nobody, like the pasuk says, Vayimach Kol Yakum. So all the Chayis, all the people, they were all wiped out. Now, so that's what it means, that the Olam was that's what it means, that the Olam Shadu B'tzar over there. Now, are you going to say it's the people in the actual table that were Shadu B'tzar? So then it's very, very different, because the people of Noach, they were actually Shadu B'tzar. Masha'ekin, in the times of Yosef, it wasn't Yosef actually Shadu B'tzar, because he had Tvua. It was just he felt bad for other people. So the two scenarios are not similar one to another. Okay, then we started getting into hay. Then we started getting into the beer and hay that will be medayek. It says in the years of famine. The lecheda. Okay, let's start again from here, because we started getting into it. We'll start again from hay. Okay, you guys hear me? You're good? Okay, excellent. Okay. Hey, Babir back in the Glashanashi, also the Adam Lashamish Mitasi Bishnei the oven. So understand this by first prefacing where Rashi says that it's also for a person Lashamish Mitasi when Bishnei the oven in the years of famine. So it never says L'cheda, seemingly Emes Takas, thus is their Lashon Gemara. You're right that this is the wording of the Gemara. Aber Rashi's doch da oisen zu abteichen im Pasuk, a viel mit Mitzayim as the Pirishus from Gemara, hat nicht gedacht Meshana sein. Nor sagen, Osir b'shnas hara'ov, with the Lashon HaPasuk, welcher is mefarish, b'terem tavi, shnas hara'ov. Now, l'cheira, Rashi should not have deviated from the wording of the Pasuk, when he said before the year of famine came. Rashi should have said, it's Osir during a year of famine. Rashi uses the Lashon of the Gemara during years of famine. Why not just use the lashon b'shnas of the year of famine? Befrat das is da achilim b'pashtus. Shnas hadav meant as dem year is da hadav. Mashegi shnei da oven lashon admin weiß as das is a matzav was tzitzich a meshach zman. Now Rashi's wording there's a big difference. Why? Because the year of famine means this particular year is a famine. In contrast, year. So that's years of year of famine, in plural is mashma that it's a famine that lasts for some time. As this is nidnar achilik in erech hazman, but so it's not only a difference between. Excuse me. It's not only the difference between the terms. It's not only regarding their duration to their of dirt blaze year or the merit. It's not only if the famine lasted for 1 year or longer. You could say, there's reason to say that there's a difference in a qualitative between the two. Wenn a Sach passiert einmal Jahr, kann sein, als das ist nur a verbeigendike passiert. Now, when you say that it happened once in a singular year, so it's like it's a passing phenomenon. Mashenkin, wenn das Chaser sich über mehr Mal man sagt, als das ist ein Schneider auf, sagt Kufa von Rav, nicht kein zu flicker Indien, nor a Dover shal chazaka. However, when you say that it repeats itself many times, and people refer to it as years of famine, it becomes a time of famine, not something just a one-time thing or a year thing. It becomes established. Adel vidashe Shem Mefarish given as Yehuda Mergad. This is like Rashi said earlier that Yehuda was afraid to let Sheila also die like the brothers because it has been established that Tamar kills her husbands. Well, there are seven done. So likewise in our case, if it's only a year of famine, ein year is a chiddush. So if it's one time, so it's a chiddush. It's a nit gewachst, kein tvua. Now, if it's a year of famine, so okay, 1 year there didn't grow famine, is endechad ela chidushay. So you only have it's a temporary thing. And das is a davar arim chudush d'shaite. So it's something which is temporary. Durch zu flicken sie bis von dem Jahr was haben gegeben as the sibbles on its vaccine. So it's the fact that there's no tvua. This occurrence could have considered nothing more than unusual, temporary, time-limited event caused by that year's unusual circumstances. Aber b'shas das is Schneide oven is das aber weiß, if a hemshech a ganze tkufa anogam yichedes the Eberster break a tkufa for no border. However, if you say that it's a years of famine, Lashon Rabim, so this points to an extended period of an unusual time during which Hashem brought famine to the world. Das ist der Tam Shutish und Mikra. Von dem ist der Shamash Mitase beschneide oven, for dem welche is nicht berov, und will stuhe bezahlt. Weil als Mann von Schneide oven, wenn die Anhogel Meile ist nicht an Eifen von Kol Yimei HaOretz, so er vekotze, lo yishbeisu, hepech Yeshuv Shalem, und nicht kein Ort zu sich äußert sein in Puruvu, milos Ort Yeshuv Shalem. So for this reason, according to Pshat, during years of famine, a person who doesn't suffer from the famine is also from engaging in marital relations, because this period is years of famine, during which the Eberster's conduct does not follow a typical course of nature described in the Torah. So, in other words, when you have continuously all the days of the earth, there's seed times and harvest shall not cease. Instead, it's a time of that there's no yeshiva, there's no settling in the world. So it's inappropriate for a person to occupy himself with fulfilling the command of having children. Why? Because we're in a state that the Eberster's Teva, the Eberster, the way he conducts the world, is not the norm. So therefore, it's not befitting for a person to have children. So that's the difference between when you say Shneida of, a year of famine, or B'Shneida oven, years of famine. Okay, so now the Rebbe says involved, Ibalas, there is just beside them. was am Matzah von Schnee der Oven, ma Chazaka, was beweist, if Anogam Yechedes, verstandig, as Kolzmans is in the talking Chazaka, is in the Isser. So, since the Isser is in a situation when it's years of famine, the famine was established, indicating that it was uniquely directed from above. So it's clear that as long as the famine was not established, the Isser was not enforced. On the contrary, Balas is da der Tzivui from Pruruvu, it's called Manis Nitab Borer, as Hamatz und Schnee der Oven, as al derech Hapshat, moving as Mentor sich nicht benähe sein von Pruruvu, also Mervatel sein Amitzasasage, Libasafik, as Efsher sein da, Schnee der Oven. Now, on the contrary, because there's a command to be fruitful and multiply, so as long as it's not certain that this period is defined as years of famine, and according to Pshat, it is clear that one is also to refrain from not having children. It's forbidden to forgo a mitzvah saseh out of concern that there's a possibility that there's years of famine. For Enfert, a Shaila now from Yitzchok and Levi, by Yitzchok is given with Kedir Kalashon Rashi, no Ashnas Re'oven, nicht Schnee Re'oven. Aber der ist bei Levi, ist das gewähnt beim Oned Gimel Chadashim von 2. Jahr von Rav, worauf Jechev ist geboren beim Seif von 2. Jahr von Rav. Nach Eiders ist gewähnt die Chazaka von Schnee Re'oven. So now the Rebbe says like this. Based on this, we can understand why Yitzchak did not refrain from having children, and neither did Levi. Why? Because over there, if you look in the nuance of Rashi or the nuance of the pasuk, it says a year of famine. We're not dealing with years of famine. It's a year of famine. Levi also, Yecheved was conceived at the beginning of the 3 months, the 2nd year of famine. She was at the end of the 2nd year of famine. So she was conceived before there was a chazaka established as being years of famine. As their Rav is Amnogam Yechedes. Es is kumen on Sheva Shnei Re'ov. Wie der Zelt früher Barucha in der Parshas Miketz wird Pesach gewesen, es Asher Likim Oisa, you Sheva Shnei Re'ov. Der fire is beim Im given der Isser Baal dem ersten Tag on. Now, in contrast, Yosef knew directly that the famine in his time was part of a uniquely directed course of the Eibishter, and that the 7 years of famine began at that time, as the Torah describes earlier. And in the parsha that records the interpretation of Paro's dreams, what does Yosef say? What Hashem is doing? There shall be 7 years of famine. So therefore, the Isser against relations applied to Yosef from the very first day. Und Mikal lernt up as in jeden Fall, was mir weiß bevadois, as das seine Schnee der Oven, as a Shengur Nachazak is also Adam Mashamish Mitasi. Therefore, from here we learn that in all cases where we know with certainty that there are years of famine and it has become established, it's forbidden for a person to have relations. So basically, the Rebbe's question was answered very, very nicely. By Levi and Yitzchok, it's not established years of famine. They know it's a year of famine. How long it's going to last? There's no vados of how long it's going to last. So you think you're in a state of it's that year was a bad year, it was a tough year. Mashik and Yosef, he knew through the dreams that it's established now for the next 7 years. It's going to be in a state. There's going to be a drought. There's going to be a recession. There's going to be a very, very hard time in Mitzrayim. So when you're in that state, you're not allowed to have marital relations. So therefore, Rashi says, Mikan Dafka, from this story of Yosef, when there's already a chazaka that's going to be b'shnas oven or shnei oven, then you're not allowed to have relations. Okay, Zayin. So the Rebbe, the Chere can fragen, seemingly one can ask, Sichah is schon dann es Barsim geworden, Yosef's Pisrein von der Cholim Pari. Es ist wel sein, Sheva Shnei Re'ov, fragt, als man hat doch euch gesehen, wie das werden es kein Bepeil. Heinz, wie hat Levi nicht cheshish gewinnt for an Isser? Now the Rebbe asks a very interesting question. Certainly Yosef's interpretation of Paro's dream that 7 years of famine will arrive was already publicized. It was already in the paper, especially since people saw that the predicted famine was being fulfilled in actuality. So why wasn't Levi? Obviously Levi heard, he didn't know it was Yosef, but he obviously heard from Mitzrayim that there's this guy that went ahead and interpreted a dream, and whatever he's saying is being is true. So why wasn't Levi concerned about that there might be that he's violating an Isser of being in a state of famine, years of famine? So the Rebbe says that here's the Parshas. The answer is very simple. Levi dan nit gewusst as the poiser acholim is Yosef. Levi was unaware that Yosef was the one interpreting the dream. Vadrab hat gewusst as Hanar and Eved hat gewusst as the Chatum Mitzrayim. Die ständige poisliche Lebens von Mitzrayim haben das nicht gesagt, Chuli. Teure sich nicht verlassen, if Cholim Pare und a viele Pische von Hanar, Eved und Mevatel sein dem Zivi von Prudevu. So the Rebbe says that first of all, Levi was unaware that it was Yosef. On the contrary, people knew that it was a young slave interpreted Paro's dream, and the magicians or Paro's official dream interpreters hadn't given this interpretation. So Levi would have been forbidden to rely on Paro's dream and the interpretation of this young slave to take away, to not be Mekayim, the Eibishter's command, the Prudevu. Is the cloud v'rashi Hashem gebracht mit Pirshal Atera ein cholim leidvarim betelim can doch sein as afilu im chlolis acholim is emes is aber der prat as es gain sein sheva shnei oven for the dvarim betelim shabbai. Now this is especially true regarding a Yid's dream. We have a principle that there is no dream that does not include nonsense. So it's possible that in Pari's dream, even though it was generally true, the 7 years of famine was nonsense. So he didn't have enough to establish a chazakah that he's not allowed to have relations. Hey, al pi zeh wird man euch verstehen in die Galoschen Tur b'Shulchan Aruch, wo sie sein Meshan Loshens Hashas b'Shnei Oven und sagen b'Shnas Oven. On this basis, we can understand the nuance of the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, which deviates from the wording of the Gemara during years of famine, and says during a year of famine. It's also understood. In Gemara, gleich for the Maimer, Osel Adam bringt sich wegen dem Schar von Amarv Atzmi b'Shnei Oven. Was das ist, wie Rashi teich dort beschar shem Betzaras Atzmi k'shisrol Betzar. Now, in the Gemara, immediately before it says that a person is forbidden to have relations, it discusses the reward for one who deprives himself during the years of famine. And Rashi explains over there is a reward for putting oneself in distress when the Yidden are in distress. There's a gleich nach the Maimer Ausladen bringt sich the Maimer bis manche so stimmt bezahlt und pirish echad mehem chuli. And then immediately after the Gemara says it's forbidden for a person. It says when the children of Yidden are suffering from tsar and one of them separates himself, which from them is muchach. From this proves al derech halacha is the tam is nit vi al derech hapshat. Now, for this reason, according to Allah, the reason it's also for having relations, not for the reason based on Pshat that's discussed above, but rather because the Yidden of Israel are suffering in Tsar. So you could argue that the Isser doesn't only apply in years of famine, because also year of famine, Yidden are suffering from tsar, suffering from adversity. Tess. Leuten wir now in Pirush Rashi wird euch Musber wären noch a Diag in dem Ingen. Based on the above explanation of Rashi's Pirush, we can explain another Diag, another nuance. And Pasuk steht, O Yosef Yulad Shnei Vanim Beterem Tavish Nasarov. Pasuk says 2 sons were born to Yosef before the year of famine came. Was from them, was the Pasuk red wegen Leda is moving. So from the fact that the Torah speaks about the birth, it's clear that as nit nor is the Shnei Oven Gufa in dem Isser the Shamish Choli, nor euch mit die Tes Chadashim frier beefen as the Hiladol soll nit sein in the Shnei Oven. So what comes out? The Pasuk says 2 sons were born to Yosef before the years of famine came. Now, the Pasuk speaks of birth. It's clear that the Isser against relations doesn't only apply during years of famine himself. It also applies 9 months prior, so that the birth wouldn't take place during the years of famine. What does Chazal say? To have marital relations during years of famine, not before the years of famine. So who cares if the baby's going to be born b'shnei ha'da oven, if the shimush mitasi didn't take place b'shnei ha'da oven? What's the problem with that? The Rebbe says, Al Pianal is moving. Bald as the time is nicht, weil Yisrael steht mit Zar. Was damals hat an Ort zu sein abgeht, nur in die Schnee der Oven Gufa. Wenn es ist da der Zar von zu tun Apula Hofchis, nur mit Zadam Zman, was damals herrscht, die Anoga von Hebech, Yeshuva Shalelam, der Fahrer ist nicht Masse, als in dem Zman soll gebringen werden Kinder Yeshuva Shalelam Bepil. Now, so based on this, we can understand the reason that the Isser is not because the Yidden are suffering, is not because the Yidden suffering in Tsar. If this were the Isser, then only during the years of the actual famine, when there's distress, would it make sense to expect a person to refrain from having relations? For engaging in these actions would display insensitivity. Said the Isser is due to the time in which the Eibishter's like course of not populating, cultivating the world. Therefore, at such a time, it's inappropriate for children to have been born in relationships. Our das is nar shayr by Yosef, was had gevus far ois bor as is coming on shnei oven. Now this only applies to Yosef, who knew clearly at the outset that the years of famine were imminent. Schenk that man mikan for allem in some of others and mitzvah von inosele tigoda from pruruvu was is nicht shayr zu wissen bor as das an shnei oven is by zayn the wissen nor the shamash mitzvah shnei oven. Now, however, other people from here, that everyone and all those who don't clearly know that the years of famine are imminent, so they must suspend the observance of the mitzvahs and have children because it's not butter. Okay, let's do the last sif of 2 minutes. Okay. Das Zetten wie Pirish Rashi al Teda was libasi al pshutai is verbunden mit jene Shaltena Cheli the Kassed Tributary. From here we learn on Rashi's commentary by Rashi that he says it only explains Pshat. You can learn also the Seder of Teda. We must change it the Mol Barufa as Geshem be in the Dal Ilamis in Elam Atzil Shaf Elam Asir Dafka. As they say the Chilek Asir Tributary was connected Elam Atzil verbunden Dafka with the Chilek Pshat Elam Asir. We spoke about many times that in regard to the four worlds, the world of Atzilas correlates with the world of Asiyas. Specifically, so the Soy part of Torah, which corresponds to the world of Atzilus, correlates with Pshat according to which is Asiyah. And there, for Heintik Sedra, is Mevur as Yimei HaRa'ov and Yimei HaRa'ah. When the fire is Yosef Sos Mevui B'Shnas HaRa'ov, while the kinder was very geborn from them was Eftach Mevui B'Hai Zimna V'Rat Angru from Bonum Zorim. Now, the Zohar in our Parsha explains that the days of famine were days of evil. Therefore, Yosef shut his wellspring in a year of famine because children born from someone who opens his wellspring at that time are called foreign children. Danach viert ois der Zeher, as Yosef hat bavard, nach merdet leimev bonnen the sitra mesava. Was das meint, wie der Tat is mevar, in seine Oris of Zeher, as hat euch bavard sheilada leitie b'shnas adam, afile ben ha'ilada heim atipish shekedim b'shnas adam, the garmishim ha'ilidasam tie b'shnas adam, so this means the Zohar says that Yosef was even more cautious not to give children the spirit of impurity. This means, as the Rebbe's father explains in his notes to the Zohar, that Yosef also was cautious that the birth of his children should not take place during the years of famine, even if the children would be from seed originating entirely from the year of famine. Because the birth would take place in the year of famine would mean that in any event that they were born in a place of tumah. Was das is masking den Bier now, and Pirish Rashi as the time is nitval Yisrael shirim b'tzar nor, so there's a man was this matzav anogo v'shnas adom kanal barucho. Now, this works very well. What Rashi says that the Isser is not because the Yidden are shuying in adversity, but because of the time. It was a time that had the demeanor of years of famine, as discussed barucho. On those Zetman wieder the nifloyes in Pirish Rashi lateres b'shas man learned Pirish Rashi mit der hanocha. As is geschrieben geworden, ich fahre, wenn Chamash Miketz, Mila Tash min Rashi wird gepschutem, bis er viele, wenn Rashi ist Matelisch, na Gemara ist aber sein Kavone, dabei, wie der Pirisha Pshat, von die Werte, wie sie wird geteilt, von der Chamash Miketz wird. Der Mila kam Pom, vereinfacht Schaklatari von der Forschung, nimmt davon, in Jahren mit Flame, von jeder Schaklatari. So Rashi says, the Rebbe says here, we see again the wonders in Pirish Rashi, or we learn Rashi's commentary under the assumption that it was also written for a 5-year-old, beginning with Teda. We explain also Rashi, according to Mikra, to the extent that even Rashi is saying the words of the Gemara, we understand that his intention as saying these words is in line with the plain meaning, as a Ben Chumash the Mikra could understand, and he quotes often many questions and back and forth discussing by the commentaries are resolved just by learning Pirush Rashi. Okay, have a great day.